Cities project from the lead procurer's side. Today I'm going to tell you something more on the tendering procedure, like the documents involved, some crucial dates and numbers, and how you should submit your tender. Also, I'm going to tell you already something more on the monitoring and evaluation of the 3 phases, once the contracts have been awarded and the development phases have started. All the tender documents are published on the Select4Cities website and should be downloaded there. However, the request for tenders consists of more than one document. You can see them all in this slide. First of all, there are the 4 descriptive documents that should be read very carefully in order to grasp the Select4Cities project, the challenge, and the procurement procedure. The first and most important document is Tender Document 1, the request for tenders, as it connects all the tender documents, and it also presents the general context and the tender procedure of the Select4Cities tenders and contracts. Then we have Tender Document 2, the functional description, which describes the PCP challenge, the different phases, the requirements, deliverables, and the way each phase will be scored. Tender Document 3, that is the framework agreement. And that is the contract covering the 3 PCP phases which will be signed with the selected contractors. Important to know, the framework agreement sets all the framework conditions for the entire duration of the PCP, so covering all the phases. There will be no renegotiation during the project. The framework agreement remains binding for the duration of all the phases. And then we already have Tender Document 4, which is the specific contract model for the phase 1. And that is also to be signed together with the contractors that are selected and will sign the framework agreement, and it will cover the first phase, namely the concept design. And then on the right hand of the slide, there you have a second set of documents, the annexes, which are in fact the tender submission forms. Their use is mandatory in order to submit an eligible tender. So the tenderer has to fill out all of them, sign them, and submit all those annexes to the request for tender. Today we are in the request for tender phase. Tenderers can submit a tender until the 14th of April. The Select4Cities PCP is implemented by this framework agreement covering those 3 phases, with a specific contract per phase. In phase 1, the design of the Select4Cities platform is established. In phase 2, the contractors will build a prototype, and tests will be performed in a technical lab environment, as already said. And in phase 3, a pilot deployment of the selected prototypes will occur in a living lab environment. Tenders selected will be asked to sign the framework agreement and the contract for phase 1 at this time. In each phase, tenderers are competing with each other. So at the end of phase 1, an evaluation will be made, and only the most promising concepts will be invited to submit an offer for the next phase call-off. The same will apply for the phase 3. Tenderers are asked not only to submit their detailed offer now for phase 1, but also to state an outline of their plans and goals, including price information for the phases 2 and 3, and thus giving the specifics in order for the further exploitation of the further commercial exploitation of the R&D results, which is also an important aspect of this project. How do we intend to proceed with the tendering process of this PCP? In the Tender Document 1, you can find this following timeline. So the most important deadline for now, I think, is the 14th of April, 10 o'clock CET, by which your tenders will have to be submitted in order to be evaluated and to be awarded a contract. Meanwhile, there are still some useful communication and clarification events planned. The deadline for your questions in writing, for instance, is the 20th of March, and then we still will have another webinar on the 24th of March. After the opening of the tenders on the 14th of April, the buyers group will start the evaluation. We expect to have the contractors selected and the contracts signed by the end of May. If we feel the need for clarifications on the tenders, we have already tentatively set 2 dates in order to be able to consult you online, and that is on the 26th and or on the 27th of April. So if you would be so kind to block maybe already those dates in your calendars, that might be useful. And then, if all goes well, we intend to start with the phase 1 on the 1st of June and end it by the 31st of July. Then, after the evaluation of phase 1, the most successful contractors will be invited to submit an offer for the phase 2. We intend to open the phase 2 call-off by the end of September somewhere and be able to start phase 2 by the 15th of December. The phase 2 will have a maximum development time of 6 months. Same mechanism again goes for the phase 3, where we plan to perform the living lab testing somewhere between November 2018 and August 2019. But of course, all these timings, and especially the ones on the phases 2 and 3, can still be subject to changes. If changes occur, then we will communicate them in a timely manner to all the tenders. The total budget for the PCP is 3.26 million euros, VAT excluded. The total budget is fixed and cannot be increased. This total budget then again is divided in 3 PCP phases and distributed per phase, as you can see in the table. The buyers group expects a minimum number of contractors per phase of 9 in phase 1, 6 in phase 2, and 3 in phase 3. However, the exact number of contracts finally awarded will depend on the prices offered and the quality of tenders passing the evaluation. The number of contractors awarded per phase is constrained by the maximum budget per phase. The lower the average price of tenders, the more contracts may be awarded. Contracts are then funded again until the remaining budget is insufficient to fund the next best tender. In case of unallocated leftover budget from the previous phase, this may be transferred to the next phase, but mind that the maximum budget per contractor for the total of phases 2 and 3 will remain the same. Also note that the PCP procedure requires a minimum of 3 or more contractors in phase 1 and 2 or more contractors in the subsequent phases. If these numbers are not achieved, the process may be cancelled, but we hope it will not be the case, of course. Participation in the tendering procedure is open on equal terms to all types of operators, and this from any country, also regardless their location, size, or governance structure. Of course, there is a requirement relating to the place of performance of the R&D services, and it's also described in the tender document 1 in section 3.5. Tenders may, it has already been asked earlier, tenders may be submitted by a single entity or may be submitted in collaboration with others. So you can do a joint tender by means of subcontracting or a combination of the 2 approaches. In a joint tender, the role of each member of the consortium or of the subcontractor will have to be specified. And also an authorized representative of the association will have to be appointed as lead tenderer. We also expect that there will be a signed statement in between the contractors in which they agree to set up a team and to participate jointly to this project. And especially that they know that they are aware of all the provisions that are set out in the tender documents, and in particular in relation to the IPR requirements there. All details of lead tenders lead tenderers and members will have to be stated in the Annex A. Which tenderers are eligible for awarding? We have 4 categories of criteria. The purpose of the exclusion criteria is to determine whether the situation of the tenderers and subcontractors is okay. So there will be an assessment based on responses to questions in the Annex B on a fail or a pass or fail basis in order to establish this situation. A tenderer may be excluded from further participation if they do not meet one or several of those criteria, of course. The purpose of the selection criteria is to determine whether a tender has the necessary financial, economic, and technical and professional capacity to carry out and perform the work. The tenderer needs to showcase this ability in order to successfully complete the project and of this nature and of this size. Any tender that cannot meet the requirements in the section will also not be selected. Then we have the compliance criteria, and this is to determine whether a tender is compliant with some of the Horizon 2020 principles, like PCP, public financing, place of performance, research integrity, security, and so on. Therefore, tenders must comply with all those compliance criteria. They will also be evaluated on a pass or fail basis, and this will be based on the responses given in Annex D and also on the information that will be given in Annex F, the financial offer and price breakdown. And then finally, the contract awarding will be based on the most economically advantaged tender. Therefore, the tender's technical offer, which is Annex E, and the financial offer in Annex S will be used to access and score the extent to which a tender meets these criteria. A threshold has been added to those criteria that are valued mostly by the buyers too. The submission process: tenders shall be received no later than the closing date, and that is the 14th of April 2017, 10 a.m. Central European Time. And for submission, all tenders must use the tender annexes. They can be accessed and downloaded along with the other tender documents from the Select4Cities website. The lead procurer may request clarification if necessary. The tenders have to be submitted electronically, and this via the e-platform for e-tendering. There is an extensive and dedicated manual on the submission process that is published on the website. We have, for this particular procurement, we have switched off or disabled the digital signature function, but we expect that you sign all your tender submission forms separately and either electronically or in so-called blue ink before uploading. Of course, your signatory must have the proven power and capacity for a signed tender to be considered as a valuable and binding offer. Each tender separately carries responsibility for the accurate, timely, and complete uploading of the tender, so please start the submission of your tender timely. For instance, there may occur maintenance on the e-tendering application, which may cause unexpected system interruptions, and this could jeopardize your submission. So please start early with this. Tenders will be evaluated in a non-discriminatory and a transparent manner. First, tenders will be checked on the basis of the compliance with the exclusion, selection, and compliance criteria and with the conditions of the tender. If proven to be compliant, the technical and financial sections will be evaluated. If deemed necessary, an online hearing may take place where you will be asked to clarify your aspects on the technical offer. Only tenders with the following minimum scores are eligible for consideration for a contract. That is 60% of the maximum number of points for each of the criteria separately, and then also 60% of the maximum number of points for the combined scores. If you fail to achieve this minimum score for any of those tender components, this will result in the tender not being included for further participation in the evaluation. Once the contractors have started with the first phase, contract implementation will be monitored periodically and reviewed against the expected outcomes for the phase. This can be online, on-site, or in the procuring cities. In tender document 1, you can already read the expected number of monitoring meetings and the expected locations. On the end of each of these phases, the contractors will have to submit their end of phase reports, including all the listed deliverables and results. The end of phase reports will be assessed then by the buyers group in order to determine whether the respective contractors have either satisfactory or unsatisfactorily completed a phase. This satisfactory, unsatisfactory completion will determine whether the contractors shall be paid or not. The buyers group will also evaluate if contractors have successfully completed a particular phase, and consequently, if they are eligible to participate in the call-off for the next phase. Meanwhile, in order to help you understand the tender documents better, the challenge and the PCP procedure, we have organized another webinar on the 24th of March, and all your written questions can be addressed to the lead procurer Digipolis till 20th of March. If you do so, please do not forget to mention the reference number and also state the correct document and page number you are referring to. And then, yes, I would like to close with the fact that we are, of course, looking very much forward to all your tenders, and we hope to receive a lot of valuable solutions. Are there any questions on this part? I have to check the chat box, I think. Because there are some questions. The question for the logistics of signatures. Signature of the annexes has to be original by each individual member in case of a provider consortium. That's a question. Digital signature certificates that are nationally accepted will be accepted also in this process. On the first part of the question, it is depending on the nature of the annex, which annex will have to be signed only by the lead tenderer or by members of the consortium or the subcontractors. It should be clear in the description of the annexes. It's always mentioned there who has to sign. And then the digital signature and certificates, it is of course for that reason that we have disabled the function in the e-tendering platform, because we foresaw that some non-Belgian partners, because it's a Belgian platform, would have some difficulty with this. So we have agreed that all the annexes could be either signed in blue ink or signed digital separately and then uploaded on the platform. And then the platform will keep on mentioning that your submission report has not been signed electronically or digitally, but in the manual is also stated that you can ignore this. We want the annexes to be signed separately and then just uploaded them timely on the platform. That is the process that we are going to use. Then there's another question by Wings. Is it possible to add a subcontractor after the first phase, or we should have subcontracting for the beginning? That is also clearly stated in the tender document 1. We expect that you describe your consortium and your subcontractors already very detailed now, but of course we understand that things can change underway. Companies can fail, subcontractors can stop to exist and things like that. So consortia or teams can change, but this have to be yes, it's mentioned in the tender document. It has to be declared. It has to be in a written written agreement, and it has to. It's also stated in the tender document. It cannot change, of course, the nature of your consortium. So, for instance, services that were described to be performed by some kind of partner or a subcontractor will still have to be able to be delivered. So, but it's written very clearly, I think, in the tender document 1. You have to read that document very carefully. Then there's another question at the end of each phase evaluation. At the end of each phase, evaluation is carried out towards payment. On which basis? When are the criteria acceptance communicated? They're already communicated now in tender document 1 and tender document 2, I think. There are several sections that are dedicated to the award criteria, the evaluation criteria, and also what we expect, how we are going to score is also described in the annexes, and also what is quality for us is also described in tender document 1 somewhere. Next question. If a tender is accepted, at which stage is the funding provided, before or after the commencement of the phase? That is also in tender document 1. So we have a payment schedule there, and it differs phase per phase. It's based on the duration of the phase, and it's based on the deliverables that will have to be delivered during the phase. So like it is now, the phase 1 is the shortest one, and there we have only a payment at the end of the phase, and the phases 2 and 3 are longer, and there are more deliverables in between, and there we have interim evaluations that can be followed by interim payments, but it's clearly described in tender document 1. Is it imaginable to get to know other participants or another possible participant subcontracting in the course of the phase's time? This may be even advisable in an R&D context. Is it possible to reconstruct a consortium in a later phase, or does it need to be announced from the beginning on? That's like it's more or less the same as the first question. We would like to know now in the beginning what your consortium or your subcontracting team and management plan would look like, but of course things can change. Is it possible to interchange partners from other consortia? I don't know whether it's really feasible. There is in the tender document 1, there is, I think the only restriction there is that only one lead contractor can submit an offer, but it does not say whether other partners can be interchangeable or not. But whether it is still a competition, so I don't know whether it's advisable to have several partners in several consortia. But this section is also described very clear in the tender document 1. Next question, single country application. Can a consortium be formed by single country members? Single country members. Can a consortium by, yes? Yes. The only restriction there is that the single country will have to be an Horizon 2020 associated country, and there also the list is included in the tender 1 document. You mentioned tenders will be evaluated on the basis of the tender's financial capabilities. Aren't you providing the funding? Should startups do not have existed not bother applying? I think you should read the selection criteria in tender document 1 first clearly, because it is, of course, the selection criteria on a whole are established to establish whether your company is capable of delivering the services, and that means technically, financially. But as you will see, we do not focus on the selection criteria on all those those aspects in the same way. So I advise that you read the selection criteria first and then see what we ask on the selection criteria there, because we do not ask financial financial numbers of your company, for instance. It's more on who your team will be and will you be able to deliver the services that we ask. Please read the tender document 1 very carefully on that. And I think those were all the questions for my part for now. If there are no other questions, I would like to